Hello, and welcome back to the Borderlands 2 OpenBLCMM modding tutorial. My name is Aaron, and today we are going to start properly working in Object Explorer, finding out all of the different functions and necessities of OpenBLCMM, and begin writing our very first line of code. If you did not watch the Day 0 video, I would highly suggest checking out the Day 0 video in order to set up OpenBLCMM and learning what it is you have to need before watching this video. But before we begin though, I did just want to clarify something that we did not cover in the last video. There are two different types of mods that exist in Borderlands 2. They are the text mods, which we're doing now in BLCMM, and SDK mods, which require the use of Python. I am not experienced myself in Python, but if you look up tutorials about Python and how to get started making SDK mods for Borderlands 2, there are plenty of resources out there to help you accomplish that. So, for the purposes of this tutorial, we are simply just going to be covering text mods in OpenBLCMM. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and make a new file in OpenBLCMM. You should just have one singular folder that says root in it, and it is blue, as you can see it right here. Next, we're going to go ahead and open Object Explorer. You do that by going to Tools, and then Object Explorer. In Borderlands 2, there are several different hierarchies that make up the foundations of the game. Packages contain several different classes that make up a certain aspect of code, while classes have different objects inside of them. Packages can vary from animation sets to skill definitions to gun parts, but they're all usually combined into one package when Unreal Engine ships, so that it's easier for Object Explorer and for people to find the line of codes they need. So for example, Salvador's packages can all be found under the package of GD_mercenary. The easiest way to look at packages is to actually go to the search field in Object Explorer and type in get all package. And once it is done loading, you can see all of the different packages that come with Borderlands 2. As I said before, packages make up several different classes, and within those classes are different objects. Objects are going to be the thing that we work with the most. In the top left-hand corner, you'll see a small window that says Class Browser BL2. This lets you look at all the different classes the game has to offer. Note, this is not a catch-all or a definitive way to exactly search what you're looking for. There's going to be a better way to do that. I'll show you in a second. But for example, if I wanted to go and take a look at all the different damage types that are in the game, there's a class called Damage Type. If you scroll down and click onto the Damage Type folder, it will populate the object browser in this window here. After that, there's going to be two additional folders, one of them named Engine and the other Willow Game. Clicking on either of these populates all of the different actual objects that are contained inside that folder. However, there is a much easier way to look specifically for what you need, and that is by going to the search bar and typing a get all for that specific definition. So if we go to the search bar and type get all damage type definition, you can see that this will bring up all of the different damage type objects that are going to be in the game. Everything in the game is handled by definitions. If you wanted to take a look at the Herald, for example, that would be a weapon part definition. If you wanted to look at Maya's skill tree, that would be a skill tree branch definition. If you wanted to look at the balance of a gun and see what parts a gun can come with, that's a weapon balance definition, so on and so forth. For the purposes of modding in this tutorial, there are several different definitions we're going to be working with, and I'll put them up on screen now. They are as follows. Weapon part definition, weapon name part definition, weapon balance definition, AI pawn balance definition, inventory balance definition, attribute definition, attribute presentation definition, mission definition, and skill definition. There are many, many more definitions to cover, but these are simply going to be the main ones that we're working with. So now how does all of this tie together? Well, let's go ahead and do a search all or a get all for a weapon part definition. This will pull up all of the different weapon parts that exist in the game. There's 1,786 objects of a type weapon part definition in Borderlands 2 data. These are all the grips, accessories, barrels, bodies of the guns, and even the scopes. It's pretty much every single part that exists in the game. All of these different objects can be looked at by double-clicking on them. So I'm going to click the very first one that pulls up, which is GD underscore anemone underscore WEAP underscore sniper rifles dot accessory dot sniper underscore accessory underscore bayonet 1. Within this object contains a set of parameters. There's a prefix list. There is a weapon name part definition inside of that prefix list, custom damage type definition, which is set to none, a custom firing mode definition, which is set to none, and an external attribute effects, which breaks off into a list that has an attribute to modify with an attribute definition of D underscore attributes dot damage source modifiers dot instigated melee damage modifier. Modifier type says pre-add, and then base modifier value, which goes into another list with a base value constant, base value attribute, initialization definition, and a base value scale constant. And then finally, there's a weapon card attributes that breaks off into a list as well and says attribute equals attribute definition, D underscore attributes dot damage source modifiers dot instigated melee damage modifier. And then there's a priority increase integer that says 0.5, as you can see here. So you're probably looking at all this and are very confused right now. Not to worry though, this is what this tutorial is here to cover. So, starting from the very foundation of the weapon part, we all know in Borderlands 2, there is a bayonet accessory that increases your melee damage by 50%. This is basically what this is doing. Within the prefix list is the name of the prefix that is applied to the weapon if the gun has this specific part, which if we double click this weapon name part definition, you can see here as I highlight the part name, it's called Mama. So then if we go one step back to the original object we searched by using this button here, we will be back at our original object. Now you're probably thinking, what is external attribute effects and how does this work? Within the game, there are several attribute effects that can spawn on weapons and parts. There are 4 of these and I'll put them on screen now. They are weapon attribute effects, zoom weapon attribute effects, external attribute effects, and zoom external attribute effects. Names sound pretty easy to figure out, but all of these have different properties and clauses. Weapon attributes apply to the gun only. External attributes apply to the player. And then obviously there's different effects that happen when you ADS with a weapon. Take for example doll weapons. They burst fire when you ADS with them. That's part of their zoom weapon attribute effects. Likewise, zoom external attribute effects only take place when the gun is zoomed in. So let's break down this section of external attributes in more detail. Every stat in the game, whether it be something like magazine size, reload speed, critical damage, actual gun damage, anything like that, is determined by what's called an attribute. So in this case, this attribute is increasing our melee damage. As said before, external attributes apply to our character itself, and melee damage is a character attribute. So therefore, it assigns the external attribute effect to this particular weapon part. If you did a weapon attribute effect for an instigated melee damage modifier, it would not work, as guns don't have melee damage, the player does. You're also probably looking at the purple text that says MT_preadd, and what does that mean? There are 3 different types of modifier types in the game, and they are preadd, post-add, and scale. Preadd is an additive bonus to an attribute before all other bonuses are applied. Post-add is an additive bonus to an attribute after all of the other bonuses are applied. Those are pretty straightforward. Scale is a multiplicative bonus that also multiplies with all other bonuses that are scale. You'll most commonly see scales in skills, which we'll get into later, and scales are most commonly used with weapon damage or any other attribute that applies to weapons. That's not to say pre-adds and post-adds don't exist within weapon attributes, but they are most commonly just scales. With that being said, you can deduce that in the base modifier value field of this weapon part, that it increases melee damage by 50%, and it runs before all other melee bonuses are applied because it's a pre-add. And then finally, the weapon card attributes puts on the actual card of the weapon that this attachment lets the player do 50% more melee damage. Priority increase tells the game to put the line where it says 50% melee damage onto the card. Otherwise, if there was no priority increase integer, the attribute would either show below important information, like the red text or how much the scope zooms in on a weapon, or it would just actually not show up at all. So now let's actually write a change to the game's code. So going back, which you can hit the back arrow in Object Explorer to go back to the previous menu, like I said before, we're going to go ahead and look for the Herald, and we are going to change the base stats of the Herald. So if you are familiar with Borderlands 2, you know that the Herald is going to be a Torg pistol barrel, so it is going to be a weapon part definition. So we are going to scroll all the way down until we can see GD_weapon_pistols, and then we'll kind of get an idea from here that, this is going to be what we need to change. We know that it's a barrel, we know that it's a weapon definition, and we know that it's a Torg weapon pistol barrel. So we'll scroll all the way down to where we can see these. But wait, there is no Herald. We see the Infinity, which we all know is the Infinity, and we see the Teapot, which we all know is the Teapot. But what is this Kala? Kala is the actual the code's name for the Herald. If we click on GD weapon pistol barrel Torg Kala, we can see that it actually brings us to that object. And if we look at the weapon name part definition in the title list, we can indeed confirm that this part name comes out to be Unkempt Herald. So it helps to pay attention to exactly knowing what you are looking for in terms of what you need to change. Why is it called Kala? I don't know. So now we'll go back. We know that the Unkempt Herald has its own firing mode definition that sets it apart from other Torg pistols. Because the pellets split further away and create new pellets, it has its own firing mode definition. We'll talk a bit more about firing definitions at a later time. As laid out here, the Unkempt Herald has 4 different attributes that it changes. It changes the weapon clip size, which is the magazine size, weapon shot cost, which obviously increases the cost of firing the weapon, the weapon fire interval, which is the interval between shots, and I will explain this a bit more detail in a later video, and the weapon damage. Now we all know the Unkempt Herald is a little bit too powerful, so what if I wanted to change its damage to be slightly less? With that, we're now ready to create our first line of code in OpenBLCMM. So you can Alt-Tab back, or you can just minimize this window to get back to the original screen. And then we're going to go ahead, click on this root. You'll see that the line turns red. And then we're going to right-click, and then we're going to insert. You can also just hit the insert key on your keyboard, and it will automatically pop up the window. So a new window will pop up saying Edit Window. This is where all the magic pretty much happens when making lines of code. In the top right-hand corner, there is an option for hotfix. We're going to leave this alone for right now, but I will show you 2 different ways of making the same line of code for what we're about to do. Every line of code in OpenBLCMM is going to start with set, S-E-T. As you can see here, this prompts the game to set the particular object that we are working with to have its new properties. It turns blue, and that will let you know that the command has worked. So now we're going to grab our object path from Object Explorer. Again, you can go ahead and Alt-Tab to get back to Object Explorer, or you can bring up the window again. And we are going to copy this entire object path, gd_weapon_pistol.barrel, then .pistol_barrel_torg_kala. And we are going to paste that here. The object will turn green, and this will let you know that the path to that object has been successful. Then, we want to change the weapon attribute effects on the object. So we're going to go back to Object Explorer once again, and we are going to copy everything from this line all the way down to the last parenthesis right here. And you can do that, Control-C, and then go back to our edit window and Control-V, and it will copy everything for you. Finally, we're going to delete the equal sign that is on the weapon attribute effects. So we're going to get rid of it like so. Then we're going to scroll down all the way to where it says attribute definition, d_attributes.weapon.weapon damage. We're going to look at the base value scale constant, and we're going to change that to, let's do -0.2. So all you have to do is just put a negative sign there. Then click OK. Sometimes this checkbox will light up automatically, other times it will not, so just make sure to hover over your checkbox and click it to make sure that it is turned on. And with that, congratulations! We successfully written our first line of code. So let's go ahead and save our mod. So go to File, Save As, and then if it is not directed immediately to your BL2 binaries folder, you can go ahead, click on the button that says BL2 binaries directory, and it will save there. You want to save your BLCMM mods into the binaries folder. That's how the game will know that you are executing the mods is from your binaries folder. And we're just going to go ahead and call this YT, YouTube, and then click Save. So there we go. Our mod has been saved. Now, when we load the mod, which we'll be getting into in the next video, we will see the changes made to the Unkempt Herald, where its damage has been decreased. So before I did say there were 2 different ways to write the same line of code. This method is a bit more complex and should be used sparingly, but if you're only making one change to a weapon attribute effect, you can get away with doing this with more complex types of coding. And this is going to be what's called a hotfix format. Weapon attribute effects typically consist of an arrayed list. So the very first attribute here is going to be 0 in our array. If we follow down the chain of arrays, we'll see clip size is 0, shot cost is 1, fire interval is 2, and weapon damage is 3. So what you can do is change only one array inside of the weapon attribute effects by using what's called a targeted hotfix format. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the top, and after where it says weapon attribute effects, we're going to put a left bracket, then 3, and then right bracket, and then a period. This tells the game to specifically look for the third array in the list of weapon attribute effects. However, at this current point in time, it's not going to do anything, and it's going to throw an error. We need to assign more to this particular path. So after the period, we're going to do base modifier value, and then another period. Then after that, we're going to put base value scale constant. And then we're going to put a space, and then we're going to type -0.2. You can add all of the leading zeros if you wish, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at -0.2. Then delete everything else past this line, like so. What this line is doing is specifically looking at array line number 3 in base modifier value, in base value scale constant, and changing only that value. But in order to do that, we need to click on the hotfix checkbox, like so. A new drop-down will appear that says level on it, and then a text box saying level none will appear. I will leave these be for now. So what's the difference between these two ways we wrote the same line of code? For the purposes of this line, the command that we had set will be run every single time a level is loaded. With the way that we had it written before, the command will be run exactly as it is once the mod is loaded and cannot be changed until the mod is run again. Hotfixes degrade the performance of the computer because they are run every single time a level is loaded up, or if you load a specific character. Say, for example, Gauge, that has character hotfixes applied to them. We'll get more into character hotfixes when we start messing with skill definitions, but most of the time, hotfixes can be avoided. It's only up to you personally if you want to shorthand your command lines to be hotfixes, or if you want to completely change an entire array field. Typically what I do is if I am changing the entire array to have new attributes instead of pre-existing ones, then you will need to not hotfix it and copy the entire format. But if you are simply just changing one line in a pre-existing array, you can do a targeted hotfix. So do keep in mind, like I said, hotfixes generally degrade the performance of computers and for your game. This is typically why you run into longer loading times on some mods, is because they have an excessive amount of needless hotfixes when they can just simply be overridden with new lines of code. There is one thing that I also wanted to cover, and that is actually going to be the naming schemes of all the different objects that are in the game. When we looked at this GD_anemone bayonet part, it has a GD_anemone before it. But when we looked at the Herald, it only had GD_weapon pistol, so on and so forth. That's because Anemone is part of a DLC package, and Anemone is the Fight for Sanctuary DLC. I'll go ahead and list off all the different DLC packages so you have a better idea of what to look for in terms of modding. So, Captain Scarlet DLC is packaged as Orchid. The Torg DLC is packaged as Iris. Hammerlock DLC is packaged as Sage, and the Tiny Tina DLC is packaged as Aster. Once again, Pfeiffer Sanctuary is packaged as Anemone. The Headhunters have a special naming scheme and are sometimes shared across each other in some scenarios. For example, the Halloween Headhunter DLC is packaged as Flax, though some of the Snowman DLC objects are also referenced as Flax. The Easter Headhunter is packaged as Nasturtium, though some of the Wedding Headhunter objects are also referenced as Nasturtium, as well as the Chromarax Headhunter. It helps to specifically know what you're looking for in terms of what kind of object that it is that you want to change. So that about does it for this video. It was a pretty lengthy video, but we successfully managed to write our first line of code, and we will get more into the actual results of our mod in the next video. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and ring the bell to be notified when I post a new tutorial video for this series. I'll catch you all next time. Take care.